Good afternoon. How are you? Well, it's 49 degrees today, so we dip a little bit down, but the sun is out, and that's nice, and there's no big wind. So that's the end of my Thomas Jefferson report. Those of you who wonder why I reference Thomas Jefferson, it's because, and I've said this before, so I apologize to those who know my choice of the origins of this short comment at the beginning of my walk and talk when I think about it. It's because Thomas Jefferson took measurements every day. He was, I think, compulsive in some ways, but it was his study of the science. And he considered himself not just a lawyer and the founder of our nation, but also a farmer. And he had some very interesting things if you ever get a chance to go to his place and to take any of the tours. So that's that. I mentioned Eileen Filler-Corn yesterday, who has been the Speaker of the House, the lower house in the Virginia General Assembly. And she is, as I understand, the first woman to be a speaker in 400 years, the history and length of the General Assembly. And she's running for the 10th Congressional seat in Northern Virginia, a seat many years ago, 1984. I ran for, but the voters decided I should remain a trial lawyer. Instead, although they did give me 95,000 votes, was a tease. So, now, but there's another interesting bit of news, and that is that Delegate L. Scott, who I think is 58, is from Portsmouth, that he has become the the first black speaker of the General Assembly. So, Virginia's gone, while I've been here, from bright red to smudgy red to purple to blue, back to some purple, and in this last election on Tuesday, because the Republicans have been so outrageous, we Dems took control of the General Assembly, but both the upper and the lower house. And so we're able to have these kinds of changes. And our governor, not mine, but chosen in an election, not stolen. How refreshing, a Republican who doesn't steal an election. He had hoped, but by campaigning across Virginia, if he could win the General Assembly to his way of thinking, that would put him in a good place to run for president. He may have been saved. This may have been a blessing for him. You probably all know the story about Winston Churchill after the war. He had been prime minister, but then he wasn't elected. And so he was quite down in the mouth, and his wife said to him, well, perhaps it's a blessing in disguise. And Churchill, in his parumph way, said, forgive me, my dear, but as a blessing it is entirely concealed from my understanding. Paraphrase, I'm sure, and couldn't be delivered as well as, or as depressed as Churchill must have delivered it. In my case, I think there was a certain, truth that it was better for me to lose, I think, because I've had so many other opportunities of leadership and experiences that I might not have had if I was fighting on the Hill. Anyhow, you choose courses as they come around. Now, in terms of the give and take of elections, Biden seems to be attracting challengers, and you got to wonder, for example, Jill Stein was having dinner with Putin before she became a candidate in an earlier election, and plainly she was there and underwritten to help take votes against, take votes from Hillary Clinton, and I think she did that. It's always dangerous because you don't know who will lose votes when you, who have a followership or leader, who will go with you. Now, you're talking about how Robert Kennedy, who is hardly a Democrat and dropped out of the Democratic primary, or what he claimed he was fighting to do, which is to run in the primary, is now an independent, and some polls have him at 20% or something. Anybody who votes for either of these two people does not want to have Biden, perhaps, but they do want to have Trump, because he is probably the beneficiary. Although some are saying, well, that Bobby Kennedy is in the race, that may help Biden, because those people may be taken away from Trump. It's just endless. And then we have a Democrat who says he wants to run, and you have to think through the thought experiment. They know they're not going to be nominated. They know they're going to lose. So are they saying, gimme, I want to be bought off? Now, the other question is, if that's their thinking implicitly, because they're not going to admit to it, have they already been bought off? In other words, like Jill Stein, she's one of the most suspicious of the crew, given her former appearance on the ballot in a presidential election. So what can we expect here? What is Robert Kennedy doing? No relation to his father's policies, though of his blood, of his DNA, but suffering the criticism of his siblings and friends of long standing. Whatever happened to the guy who was fighting for clean water? I don't know. All of a sudden he got anxious, or so he said, about other things, and he went off the reservations. Hard to understand. Now, those of us who care about the fact that the planet is in danger took note that there's now been a study that claims that global warming, I don't say climate change because that's bullshit, global warming in this past year has been its hottest in 125,000 years. That's encouraging, isn't it? Now, I don't know what weathermen kept those records, and I don't think I got it wrong, because when I read it, I reacted to it, and so may you. And it's kind of interesting, at the same time this is happening, Trump is talking about supporting oil and drilling. What does that come down to? The almighty dollar. How many avenues to the voters can I buy with how much money? And that's Trump. And some people are attacking Trump's mental acuity. I attack Trump's vacuity, his emptiness of reason, of compassion, of democratic inclinations, of trustworthiness, of a proud mission. But that's where we are with him. We all know it, and there appears to have been a hypnotism across America that affected 30% of the Republicans, and they think this is all okay. We've learned from a couple of the recent engagements between Israel and Hamas that Hamas is not as improvised in its weaponry as was true before. This time they have rocket launchers and anti-tank missiles. Oh, good for them. Now, the superior force is Israel. So, the fact that Hamas, and in time, who knows, Palestinians, the Hezbollah, whomever else, may come into this. But in the meantime, it looks like Hamas can fight and do some real damage and would likely lose. But remember, there have been wars over the years, including our civil wars, in which the outcome of different battles and confrontations have led to surprising results. After all, the South did have superior generals. But we had Grant, who won many a well-fought battle, and that's something to keep in mind when you're looking at people who are desperate and hungry and believe in a way that some of us may not be able to understand because we didn't suffer it or know it. And this goes in these races to both parties, both to the Israelis. Well, I say two parties, but there's the ones that we focus on, I suppose, are the Israelis and Hamas, but also the Palestinians. And over in Lebanon, at the borders, the Hezbollah, are still pushing their case. And it's like, how long will this go on before we break through the door? Now, on the Hill, called the House of Representatives, really should be called the Madhouse, point period, not the People's House, point period, because the work that is being done there is all show. We often say about candidates, is this candidate a workhorse or a show horse? These guys are more like a perverse black comedy in which what they do, the outcome is always the kind of thing that makes your blood boil and your toes curl, and the worst of it is nothing comes of it that's any good. And that's what the House is all about. And I spoke about how there are these proposals, and by just several days from now, the end of the week, we either have an ongoing resolution, or we pass the spending bills, or the government closes down. And that's not acceptable. Now, I meant to say, when talking about those who would be president by beating Trump and winning the nomination, some are referring to Haley as Haley's Comet. Like she has some advantage going forward because as compared to the children, she sounds more intelligent, respectable, constructive. And of the last, she's certainly not that. And I think that she, a little bit like what happened to Swami, she has flown close to the sun, and her wings will begin to melt. I don't know if you know the story of Icarus, the son of Daedalus, and when they were leaving Crete, what happened was Dad said, don't go too close to the waters or your wings will suffer. And don't go too high to the sun because they will melt your wings. And he went too high to the sun and he crashed and died. And in a metaphorical sense, the candidacies of these wannabe bad presidents on the Republican side, they're in that situation. They couldn't exaggerate more, and there's nothing that could restrain them by dignity or thought or a care or patriotism to do it better, to do it right. So that's how I see things on this Sunday in my cathedral of trees. All the best. Bye-bye.